Dr. Ehrlich, what are you experimenting on now, may I ask?
Syphilis.
I beg your pardon. Yes, doctor. Did you say...
Yes, Braschmeyer.
He said syphilis.
Oh, I declare. The cause of man's most vicious disease before our eyes. Hardly more than a motion. And that motion is a dance of death. If the germ has been discovered, there's cause to hope for a cure.
Syphilis became the first disease ever to have a magic bullet, a treatment targeted at a germ. With his 606th attempt, Dr. Paul Ehrlich found a cure.
606. The magic number by which devils may be cast out of the bodies of men.
But in the 40s, the best magic bullet in history came along.
We had no really effective weapon with which to combat these massive human afflictions until science gave us this. Penicillin.
But although penicillin was a marvelous magic bullet, it did have one serious side effect. It gave us false confidence in medical fixes. You see, all the medicine money can buy isn't necessarily the answer. It's certainly not stopping the disastrous spread of epidemics in one of the richest nations in the world.
Particularly in the United States, AIDS in the 90s is no longer a gay disease, it is a gay, black, and Hispanic disease. And it's still those other people, those strange people, those people who do not engender the kind of political response you need in order to get the job done of stopping the epidemic.
Black and Hispanic New York is a dangerous place, not just because of muggings and robbery, but because of the risk of catching HIV or syphilis. The reasons for these frightening epidemics have more to do with the forces which fracture a society than any germs.
Poor people have always been the focus of epidemics in history. There's an epidemic of syphilis in the United States now associated with a number of things. The abysmal living conditions of a lot of people, the absence of access to health care, and the HIV epidemic. They interact together.
These are the areas with some of the highest rates of syphilis in the country. Probably upwards of 50% of the men have a drug use history, 25% of the women.
A very common thing is crack for sex exchange, so that women who are involved in using this drug are essentially selling themselves on the street. Hundreds of partners a year. And since there's such a high rate of syphilis in the male population, usually untreated, the likelihood of transmission or infection of women is very high.
Every family has a few members who have used drugs. Every family has a few members who have AIDS. This is one of our hospitals in our medical school called Bronx-Lebanon Hospital. It's really a MASH unit. In this hospital's emergency room, 38% of the adult patients test HIV positive. That's just people coming in off the street.
So huge numbers of people in New York are carrying and spreading HIV without knowing it. And some of them even have syphilis as well. So the old and the new diseases feed off each other.
You get this kind of interaction between two epidemics, HIV and syphilis.
There's a third epidemic, and this one's an epidemic of illegal drugs. From it flows AIDS and syphilis, and it's a needless waste.
Well, the drug problem here it obsesses the country at this point. It's used as the explanation for everything wrong with America. It's attributable to drugs, not to mismanagement, not to greed, not to bad planning, not to an absence of political will to do many of the social projects that clearly need doing. In New York City alone, which has a budget of $27 billion a year, we're spending upwards of $5 billion on criminal justice system proceedings for drug users. Not for criminals who put a gun to your head they should be prosecuted and put away. But for people who buy and sell and use drugs,
I believe that you will not eliminate drugs unless you deal with the suppliers and the users. And the suppliers, you interdict the drugs before they come here to the best of your ability with the military. The drugs will come in nevertheless. And then you have to be very tough on the consumers.
we've doubled the prison population in New York City in the last 10 years, almost exclusively associated with drugs.
Money, stop taking pictures of me, man! Let's go.
I'm convinced now that our drug policies do far more harm than good. I spent about 5.5 years as a criminal prosecutor in the Bronx and then in a citywide prosecution agency. And in that time, I sent to jail probably 2 to 3, perhaps 4,000 people for drug offenses.
I support the legislation that requires major prison terms locally, federally, and where appropriate, I'm also for the death penalty.
The drug laws pretend to address what is really a public health problem and not a criminal law problem. Sending people to jail for possessing drugs or using drugs is, in a sense, blaming the victim, and in another sense, an intrusion into behavior that is really none of the government's business.
I'd stuff them into jail, just as the Japanese did. They broke the drug problem in Japan. They used amphetamines. You'll go look at a Japanese prison. It's not like an American prison, or probably not like, it's more like a Japanese prisoner of war camp. I mean, our crimes are overwhelmingly caused by people who are on drugs. I believe it's appropriate to punish people. They're punishing us.
I have a friend and client named Corinne, who's a young woman who works on the streets as a prostitute. She is an opiate injector. She injects heroin several times a day. And because of the way that heroin has been made unavailable through the drug laws, she has to have sex with strangers for money in order to feed her drug habit.
Sometimes the narcotics squad police will just be driving down the street. They pull up and they tell you to put your hands against the wall, and they tell you to empty your pocket. I don't carry around my needles or my pipe, my crack stems, because I've been arrested for that. I didn't have any drugs on me, just the needle.
We never get the big fish. We inhale these people like a whale inhales plankton, and it makes no dent on the drug trade except to make it more violent, more nasty, and create more suffering.
Well, I did have a place to live up until a couple of weeks ago, so I'm living on the street, basically. I slept all day in the park across the street.
Anybody bother you while you were there?
No, but just the fact, you know, what people must think of me, look at me and think I'm sleeping in the park. I tried to make it look like I just sat there, laid down and take a sun tan.
About half of the 200,000 drug injectors in New York are infected with the AIDS virus, and yet the city has steadfastly refused to open a needle exchange program or to offer clean needles and how to use them to drug users, arguing that it gives the wrong message. In fact, in New York City, people who give out needles in the street are prosecuted.
Which hasn't stopped groups like this, who ignore the laws to help drug users avoid HIV infection.
This is healthcare in the United States, especially New York. It's do-it-yourself healthcare. We have all these dirty needles. We have probably, like, I don't know, 15,000 by now.
We're making bleach tips tonight, which is something we do every Friday night in preparation for going out on the street on Saturday morning. I'm doing it because I, like a lot of people in this city, have lost a lot of friends and family to AIDS. My father died of AIDS in 1985. We risk arrest when we do this, yes.
Yeah, and there's a cop right there.
So we better be careful. You can exchange dirty work for clean ones. So don't share the cotton, the cooker, the water, nothing. Because the virus can live in those. Okay. Be safe.
You kind of like know you did something clean down here. It's almost like a guarantee. This kind of like gives me peace of mind.
I mean, every time you look at this block, somebody's missing.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're laying in the casket somewhere. This is very frightening.
And I think we all have optimism that ultimately this won't be illegal, that this will be recognized as a public health measure that has to be taken in this emergency situation.